The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand, and we're gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise, to get what we want, we got to organize.
Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Pantsula Podcast, brought to you by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. For those of you who have never heard of the A-APRP or have never, listened to any of our podcasts, the All African People's Revolutionary Party was founded in 1968 via Kwame Nkrumah, given his book, The Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, back in 1968. So we are a revolutionary Pan-Africanist organization with the goal of Pan-Africanism. We define Pan-Africanism as the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. So today we're actually going to be speaking on Black-on Black violence, quote unquote, Black-on Black violence, or what we, here in the A-APRP, we understand everyone that descend from the continent of Africa, or the motherland, as some people call it, as African. So I guess we could just get that out the way, and you're going to be hearing a lot of African or African on African violence essentially. So but before we get started on every episode, we like to commemorate each one to two of our ancestors. So I'm here with my comrade Evan, and he's going to go ahead and get started on the ancestors before we jump in.
All right, so two ancestors that we're going to honor today are Mallory and Josephus Vertoyer, also known as Satoyi. So Mallory was one of the group of mothers called the Harlem Nine. So they're protesting against segregated schools in New York City, and they filed lawsuits and petitions and so forth against the city for like the dilapidated conditions and poor curriculum, like run down schools and so forth. And as sadly, like even though some things have changed for the better, a lot of you might think like a lot of it's still the case whether you talk about here in the United States or elsewhere in the African diaspora or on the continent. And later on, they were part of a larger boycott against the schools. And later on, the schools were integrated. Although in the case, you'll see a lot happens is Africans fight for right for equal opportunity, for equal consideration, and Europeans I say, we don't want any of that, and they leave. So again, like some of the problems happen. And one of the things is that she was a major advocate for armed self-defense. For example, she worked with Robert F. Williams, who was the head of the Monroe County NAACP. They protected the freedom rides when they're doing the freedom rides. In addition to that, she also fought against the occupation of the Dominican Republic by the United States. She worked alongside the revolutionary Yuri Kochiyama. She also protested the Vietnam War, and she was also an organizer for the Sixth Pan-African Congress in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, in 1974. And if you want to read more about her work, you can check out, I'm not sure if it's published right now, but it's Mallory, the Monroe Defense Committee, and World Revolutions, African American Women Radical Activists from 1958, 1987. You can also check out some letters from prison by Mallory, which were helped from the Monroe Defense Committee, 1962. Monroe Defense Committee to free her in the midst of oppression by the state, and they were of the Workers' World Party. And if you want to look at more primary sources, something that we like to emphasize, the primary sources is that you can find some of them at the Walter Worth Library for Labor at Wayne State University. And the second ancestor we're going to honor today is Joseph Vertoyer, Satuye, who was the chief of the Carib people, or we might also know as the Garifuna people, in what's now known as St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The Garifuna fought it's called the First Carib War against the British in 1772, which forced the British to sign a treaty to stop the oppression and exploitation of the people. But of course, as you might know, Europeans and treaties with indigenous nations here in so-called Americas, they don't tend to hold them. So later on, they had to fight again against the British in the 1790s. Vertoyer again led the people against that, and he was killed in 1795. And later in 1796, 1797, the British took over, and most of the Carib were deported to what's now known as Honduras. And as a result of his bravery and leadership of the Garifuna people, he is listed as a national hero in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So in either case, you think about the long list of people who fought they fought once, but as you know, even if you accomplish something, you have to keep fighting, and working with other masses of Africans to get what you can and to work towards that liberation. And so I hand it back to my comrade Sadiq, who'll introduce us more on our topic.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. Appreciate that. I always want to commemorate those Africans fighting for our liberation, who fought for liberation. So once again, this episode is centered on African violence. That's been touted throughout the media over the course of decades, if not even, just a long time. It's been a long time we've been hearing about this. There's some misconceptions. There's some, things that have been trumped up in relation to it. So I guess let's first talk about and kind of just break down, what are some misconceptions or myths that we normally hear with African violence, and essentially what interest or purpose do we find to see that serve on a normal basis?
Well, the first thing we often hear about is what about the black on black crime? What you're protesting the police, but not the black on black crime. You're protesting against the military, but your tribes are fighting each other.
Yeah.
For one, is a lot of it is just it's a red herring. It's a begging a question. It's just a logical fallacy. It's not as, for one, people do, and people have said hey, this is an issue of antisocial violence of Africans against one another, and so the fact that it doesn't get covered, and even when it does get covered, it's done for the purposes of opportunists and reactionaries to just say, hey, we have to put more of the state forces on it, so that you Africans know how to act right. So that again, it's done to sort of undermine any kind of any sort of self-determination that we have to solve our issues and take care of things, and make it seem like the fight against the violence of the state, of the capitalist state against us, and the issues of universal violence between Africans is somehow separate issues, anything like that. And again, it's a diversion. It's a diversion. It makes it seem like the Africans can't do things for ourselves, and that they can't do this. That there's something pathological about it as well. It's not about deprivation of resources. It's not about the mass propaganda. It's not about an anti-people system that focuses so much on individualism and trying to get what you want. And if you don't have it, then you're somehow less than. It's not about material and psychological deprivation against you, this negative propaganda against Africans, but It's just something, and it's just something in us that just makes it seem like, oh, we can't help but fight each other. And yeah, there is like you can think of it as a sort of attachment. It's sort of like if you think that that this racist capitalist imperialist system is fighting war against you, and you're shooting someone or you're doing harm to someone else, that is like you're basically taking another soldier or taking another warrior out, and yeah, that's a problem. But again, it's not pointed out in that way. It's pointed out in a way that rids out any sort of systemic issue with regards to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you often tend to see no talk of society, no talk of imperialist capitalist crimes against humanity. You hear none of these interrelation things. They always talk about it like an isolated incident, like, well, what about African, like. And it's funny because in the same way, it kind of just diverts the attention from the crimes of the state against us, because essentially it's like, well, what about the crime that we inflict on ourselves? Like, like you said, like we're innately just like want to just kill ourselves, when most crimes, if not all crimes, are done with, based off proximity. There's no talk of like, European on European crime, or like so forth and so on. And it's just that whole thing. And you can see the correlation between the diaspora and the continent, because, then they always talk about on the continent to serve imperialism, they always say, oh yeah, tribalism. And, they always want to fight amongst each other with no understanding of the imperialist interests. Were they sowing that divide with them arming one ethnic group, or, just arming one ethnic group over the other, and just doing that just to gain resources, right? Or to benefit them essentially. Economically or whatever. So yeah, we tend to see that all the time. But yeah, even Africans even espouse these talking points. Not only is it just like, quote unquote, like white supremacists or whatever the case is. Yeah, man, I think at the end of the day, like it doesn't even do us any dual service until we make an actual analysis on, okay, why is this happening? No one innately just wants to wake up one day, or no group of people wakes up and say, oh yeah, we just want to kill each other. And, and there's also no talk of like the state putting these drugs and guns and all these other things on the streets. Like, we understand, it's crazy because on one end, we understand that Africans are powerless universally. I think that's a basic understanding for the most part. And if you don't understand that, at least join an organization and get into some PE. That's just, sad to kind of see, when these conversations are being had. And I think that's what the state wants to do, is to purposely, breed through their institutions, primarily like educational institutions, also through state propaganda, some form of like anti-intellectualism, where no one digs deeper and tries to find, looks at primary sources and find what causes these things. People just think, an undialectical or unmaterialistic understanding of the world, essentially, because of the indoctrination, and also because of the institutions breeding anti-intellectualism, and not really teaching us the right ways to form an analysis, where we think things aren't interrelated. It's kind of like, not to stray off too much, but like it kind of even reminds me on, and I think we've done, talked about this before in different episodes, but how people even talk about Zionism sometimes, like some Africans I've heard be like, oh, like, what does Zionism have to do with Africans? Why you want to serve agenda for other people, and not understanding Zionist role in East and North Africa, essentially, and just, throughout the continent, what they've done and throughout there. And then also how they have close ties with the apartheid state in South Africa, Zania. So yeah, like all these things and things we discuss are interrelated. This imperialist system is a global system, it's globalized. It's not just functioning in one aspect or one way. And there's correlation between the violence that we see on the continent and diaspora, and who's behind that. It's the same group of people for the most part. It's the same class, I should say. It's the same class of people, the ruling class at the end of the day that's deciding it. So I think, anytime we try to just say, oh, it's just Africans acting, on their own whim and on their own, just because we just hate each other and whatever, right? And I think this episode too, like, we're gonna get into myths, like kind of like we're doing now, and like misconceptions and distortions, whatever the case is. But, you know, this is also reality. Like, yeah, Africans are, like, I'm not trying to make it seem like, oh yeah, this is a complete, like, this thing isn't happening in real life. Like, people aren't actually dying from this. Like, yeah, people are dying from this, but we have to look at this dialectically. As y'all know, y'all listen to episodes. That's my favorite word. That's my favorite thing to use to form an analysis. So I would say that all the time. But yeah, we have to look at this two sides to it. That's essentially what I'm saying. You know, this is not just with like one side of that. Oh yeah, Africans just killing out each other and that's it. Like, let's not investigate further. So yeah, but I think one thing that we should dig into though is essentially, you know, when we talk of crime, is usually looked at as a static phenomenon. So I guess like let's just kind of unpack that in a way. Like, all right, like, you know, what is crime in a country or in an imperial core that commits crime against humanity, you know, consistently, you know, drone attacks and sanctions and you name it, you know, like, you know, you live inside the imperial core, like you could, you know, when you actually like dig deep or even visit some of these countries in the global south or even research about some of the international policies of these countries, you see the constant terror that they're breeding throughout the the world, and no one gets arrested for it, or like there's usually a fall guy or something like that if that's the case. But the real culprits of this isn't, you know, indicted or seeing jail time or anything like that. So I guess if we kind of unpack that a little bit and probably hear your take, and then I'll follow up on you.
Yeah, and just to follow up on your point about who defines crime, it's the ruling class defines crime. And as you said, that a person stealing the loaf of bread, the person stealing some USBs or some food from a writer or something like that, or some convenience store or a bodega, that's considered a crime. But a country stealing billions upon billions of dollars from another country, the gold reserves of another country consistently because they want to like actually use the resources of the country to care for the people inside, that's not a crime. So again, like we're saying, we're not saying that there isn't like universal violence of any kind. We're just saying that what's considered crime is ideological. So
exactly. Yeah, I think even when we think about like the legalization of marijuana in various places, you know, that goes to show that crime isn't static. Like, crime is a social construct, and the people who construct these, like kind of like you saying, it's a ruling class. Like, they're the ones who construct that, and obviously, what's best in their interest is to make sure that they don't get, you know, thrown away and locked up for 25 to life, you know, for you know, nonviolent crime or whatever, right? Whatever crimes that they commit. You know, laundering or whatever, you know, backing war criminals, whatever the case is. You know, so I think that's just a good indicator right there. I think it just essentially like showing like, hey, like, you know, because people think that crime is just a fixated thing, like it's just a fixed thing. Like, oh yeah, like no, you know, people deem we socially accept things to be crimes because whoever's in power dictates this is what crime is. It's like, oh, okay, like okay, that's what's crime, you know. Essentially, like it's not just a thing like, I'm trying to think of like a right way to put this, but it's not something that is just like fixed, right? It's not static. So and kind of like we were alluding to, is like you can't compare the crimes, you know, not to say that, you know, stealing is right, but also too, like, okay, once again, like since we're getting into like a deep analysis of this, is like, why is this person even, you know, having to engage in stealing a loaf of bread? Like, are there material conditions met? You know, essentially, like, you know, like, is this, you know what I mean? Like, can we equate this to? And then also like the person that's stealing from nations, most likely their material needs are met. That's why they're able to rob nations, because they have the capital, and the backing to do so. So they're just, you know, obviously like, you know, just trying to hoard wealth essentially. But yeah, and it's funny how it works, where you see the propaganda in the media where it demonizes those people, but then, you know, those people who actually do this terror and actually like it, when you look, I think this, I could be. I don't think I'm wrong, but like just to be on the safe side, just if anyone wants to look it up, I'm pretty sure throughout the war in Iraq, over 1 million people were killed. So it's like, let's be real here. One person, shooting an African shooting another African, or whatever the ethnic group is or racial group is, doesn't equate nowhere to that, right? Or even if it's hundreds or a few thousands. Not to say this is okay, but but we could see throughout propaganda, throughout media, throughout our social media apps, all this stuff getting thrown on TV, like, oh yeah, this is the big bad wolf, the African who's lurking in the streets ready to rob you and do all this stuff to you. So this is why we need to make sure that we understand these things on a deeper level. So I know we talked about some, but maybe we could kind of go into depth on like some factors that drive some of this violence in the communities, and what attempts have been taken over time or continuously been taken to thwart this and possibly even bring some type of unity within the communities that we're in.
Yeah, great points. I think one thing that I also want to point out is how not only are the crimes of less they put in a separate level compared to like who did it and who has hegemony, but also if you think about the United States, they have a law where if someone in the U.S. government is indicted for war crimes, but at the Hague, they can legally invade the Hague. So that's just incredible to think that that's the case. If Putin or Xi Jinping or the leaders around, like they had a law like that, they put that in your face every single day.
Oh, without question. Without question.
And it also brings about another point. If people might not be familiar with this, there's supposedly an epidemic of shoplifting at convenience stores. And look at how many people I believe is in California, and look at how many stores have to be closed because all these people are running wild, they're stealing everything. But the amount stolen compared to the amount stolen from like the shelves and also of that sort compared to the amount of wage stuff by the companies for employees at those same stores, there's no comparison. There's way more stolen from the employees than from like customers stealing from the stores. Mm-hmm. But again, you don't hear that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They just put the propaganda just to focus on the individuals who's like you said, like they might not have the ability to buy what they had because they lost their jobs or they're worried about rent or like that, or they get caught into cognitive behavior where they think they have to take something and upsell it because they think they have to do it to like make it in the field. So, and another point is I remember first time hearing about how crime or these statistics on crime here in the United States, how it dipped from the height of the early mid 80s and it just drastically cut down. And I know certain politicians like Mr. Giuliani would say, "Oh, because we're tougher on crime, we're doing this, we're doing broken windows," and threaten and so forth. Wins, but one of the key things, actually, I think there are two key things that from studies that report on why crime went down to the extent it did, is the vast reduction of lead paint. So, if you're familiar from apartments, if a child has it takes like it breathes in paint with lead in it, or they eat like paint chips with lead. That has a vast effect on their nervous system and so forth, and that affects their condition. And of course, since it's like a race's separation on which housing gets better, which housing gets better taken care of, it tends to be a racialized breakdown there. And once there's removal of that pain, there's less of that sort of antisocial behavior. And another was the rise of video games. It's like the children were, as like young children, they were less and less likely to be outside. So that means that now outside, that means like some random things might not happen. So, but even though these studies are still out there, you still get the whole whole pathology we were talking about of, well, what can we do? What's wrong with them? So, and like especially now, you hear a lot of propaganda about the rise in crime ever since like all the since the pandemic started. Like when you think about people have lost jobs, they've had to face a lot of change. They had family, friends die, or they had to face like adversity about housing and education and employment and so forth, and whether they had shutdowns or not, and then the sort of like constant change of like what to do, what not to do, where to go. That has a lot to do with that. So, but even the ones who point that out, it's in a way that doesn't really. Even if they point out in class, they do it in a way that doesn't make it as part of the system of capitalism.
Exactly. Yeah. And like even when we see the level of the crime that goes on in Chicago or like different urban cities, especially Chicago, I think in that era, or even now still, like, there was an era or a time where that was being trumped up, like, oh yeah, look, all this crime, oh, more murders are happening in Chicago than this other city in the global South, and whatever the case, or country in the global South, whatever. So it's like, people were really trumping that card up, and then that justifies, oh, we have to be tough on this, and we have to go hard, and and it really tough on crime is just code word for how do we surveil, harass, kill with impunity Africans in the street in cold blood, that's all that stuff is code word for. Like, let's treat these people as subhumans, kind of the same way we've been treated since Africans have been treated since the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, like we see that's just a justification for all of that at the end of the day. It's just kind of sick to see, to the extent how it's institutionalized within the systems, and then how, even Africans themselves, or, other people just in general outside of the ruling class, other people within even the working and poor class even exude some of these sentiments, like, oh yeah, we have to be tough on crime and but then, they're not saying that when their own their own like child or cousin or sister or brother, whatever the case is doing 25 to life, or because they on the third strike, or they had some drugs and they they're trying to sell it, whatever the case is, to meet material conditions and stuff. So yeah, I think one of the main things I've seen, or just in understanding and studying, not everyone, a lot of people, most people know this, but like, the Black Panthers have done a great job in the past, in the 60s, in the BLA, in trying to stop this policing in the communities, the occupying force in our communities, essentially, and try to take over and, form some type of self-defense and self-determination for Africans here, essentially to do that, then kind of like you were saying earlier, like, in a way, I know Robert Williams kind of exuded a lot of those same sentiments and thoughts, and even in action. as well. So I think, there's a long history just in general of Africans trying to, prevent the level of police brutality in our neighborhoods and incarceration and so forth and so on. Even in a way like drug pushing too. Like I know I believe the Panthers even had programs where they went into certain communities and like certain drug dealers and told them like, hey, like you can't sell drugs here, and did raise themselves. I think it was the BLA actually, which is the BLA was the what is it? The underground. I'm like drawing blanks.
And there's also
and
also the work of Dr. Pantsula Shakur and they did tremendous work as far as like people who are addicted to drugs off through the use of acupuncture. And the police Vice had a documentary about Dr. Shakur, Pantsula Shakur. We're still fighting to free him for what it's worth again. So for free them all. And talk about the relationship between like and how these like mass organizations we had to fight and to get to the root of the issue, like not only given the fact that the people are addicted and make sure that they're taken care of, but also like the fact that they're able to come with use acupuncture in order to help with the issue involves like international work and understanding that it's not like, as we talked about earlier, that a lot of things that are that part of this violence, like a lot of it, like Africans didn't bring that stuff here. Like if people have read the Dark Alliance by Gary Webb about the use of cocaine again to the United States through like the work for the Contras and CIA. A lot of stuff we didn't bring that stuff here, or we didn't bring those guns here. We didn't bring all that stuff here. So, and again, another point we said about the police as an occupying force. I think that's another bit of like education, and we just think of police as just part of the society. That police are there, like, oh, you're friendly policeman, policewoman here, they're gonna protect you. Blah blah blah. You're gonna get the criminals here, and then you have like 20 bajillion TV shows about police and stuff. So that gets reinforced. And if you think about it differently, then you look at police in a different way. And I think that's another point on that as well. And to go like some specifics of in regards to drugs and how the ideological one of the either has like either you can certainly critique it for its for some liberalism. I think the New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander does at least give some idea of why how the extent that crime is ideological. So I'll read a quote here. In 2005, for example, 4 out of 5 drug arrests were for possession, and only 1 out of 5 was for sales. Moreover, most people in state prison for drug offenses have no history of violence or significant selling activity. And again, like when people think of someone who they got caught for drugs, there's like a certain image in mind. And she also points out in a survey conducted in 1985, asking the following question: would you close your eyes for a second, envision a drug user, and describe a drug user, describe that person to me? The startling results were published in the Journal of Alcohol and Drug Education. 95% of respondents pictured a Black drug user, while only 5% imagined another racial group. So again, it was the base of how the superstructure is influencing the base and vice versa. So you have all these ideas of what a drug user is, how they come about, and what they do, and a drug user as well. And then you have these drugs introduced in neighborhoods that are like underdeveloped. Like pushes it so that, and then like the state forces capture those people, And so the point is understanding that dynamic, and like we talk about with the Black Panther Party, the LA, and other mass organizations, is to get it so that people are able to fight the correct enemy.
Exactly. Yeah, and that book is amazing, and and that's something that we see now, and it's crazy because it's actually just a shooting that happens like in real time, just like I think like maybe within the last hour or so in Buffalo, New York. There was mass shooting. A guy actually went into a predominantly African community in Buffalo and started shooting. I believe there some victims there, so thoughts and prayers to those families. But as we can see here, and the person who did it was an African, obviously. So so at the same time, it's like, when you look at Africans and stuff like this happens, it inflicted upon African people when you have non-Africans, predominantly Europeans, going into places where we like pray, or places where we go to shop, eat, whatever, and this continuously happens. This is talked about once or twice, and it's not really talked about to the same aspect or the same extent that Africans, when they commit crimes, quote unquote, within their own communities, then it's like, oh yeah, let's bring in some type of policy to deal with this and surveil them and stalk them and pathologize them at the end of the day. So it's just kind of sick to see that. But I think one thing that we see too, I think in the terrain of colonialism, we see identity being weaponized essentially to serve imperialist interests at the end of the day, where you have the likes of Obamas and the Kamalas and Clarence Thomas, so forth and so on, who
our New York's current mayor.
Yeah, exactly. It was Eric Adams, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so it's like, you have all these people, who are just serving these interests, but a lot of people still fall into that loop. But we see that they, through their policies, that's one thing you have to get to, is like, look at these people's policies. Don't fall for because they're African or because they identify as my same identity or whatever, same identity as me, that they automatically serve my interests. Like, there's a class aspect to it. Like, at the end of the day, and it's just their interests are not in ours. At the most of the times, because they're serving the ruling class's interests. That's why they're elected, essentially, or they're put in those positions. So I think that's one thing that we also, because like when you look at Obama and his policy, he actually revitalized a policy. I think there was like the Burn grant. Well, this is a grant, actually. There's another policy I'll probably talk about in a little bit, but the Burn grant, which was a grant to incentivize, essentially, just in lamest terms, incarcerating poor, oppressed people, just incentivizing them to do so. And I believe there's an actual like policy, I believe, that he revitalized. I think it's the COPS policy, I think it's called. See if I can find this here.
Yeah, they have an act for using abbreviations to just add a little extra ideology right there.
Yeah, exactly. It was actually Clinton's initial policy, but he revitalized it, according to Michelle Alexander, which was so the acronym is COPS, so Community Oriented Policing Services Program, and once again, that was one of the things, one of the worst programs that was under the Clinton administration. They were responsible essentially for the militarization of police, SWAT teams, and pipeline drug task forces, within these communities. So, once again, you can't fall into the trap or the loopholes of, these Africans and high powers, bureaucrats, essentially, that like get into power, like, oh yeah, they're gonna be for me, and like Kamala Harris called this up the top cop, like when she was a district attorney, back in California. She purposely like persecuted the homeless, participated in like mass incarceration. She jailed parents whose children were not attending school for strengthening the laws against drug use. She also made the situation worse for sex workers by establishing a whistle blowing program that encouraged hotel managers and truck drivers to report them to the police. She was entrapment as well for those sex workers to have female cops posed as escorts. So yeah, it was just, there's so much stuff even with her background too, as well. That's very white supremacist to put it in layman's terms. But yeah, I don't know if you want to get into like any of these type of, presidents or attorneys or just any African or colonized person who's serving, imperialist, neocolonialist agendas.
Well, I could go quite a bit on the current mayor, because I'm very, very. If people know it, I'm pretty about that. I've seen on a couple of occasions. One of the issues that's been, it obviously is like a persistent issue in this makes because of the commodification of housing and so forth. That there's like homeless population out there. Like some are. I mean, if you're in New York, you see homeless people out there. They might be on the sidewalk. They're out. They're trying to get some money together, just making sure that they get through the day. And as well, one of the things that the mayor is one of the policies the mayor put out is to like put more cops or roaches out there to clean up, make sure that people don't have to worry about their problem. So again, like dehumanizing people who, from the fact that rent is ridiculous, like it's climbing ridiculously, that inflation's going up, that people either losing jobs or they have jobs that don't have the same guarantees as some others, or they're facing some mental health mental health crisis or like trauma, abuse or so forth, that the solution is just let's just get them out, like let's just get them out of here so you don't have to worry about those pests. Like again, like it obviously it's nothing new. Like one of the things we do with analysis, when we do analysis, that you look at the old and the new and old. I've seen so many times when like all these like sort of ration news about like random attacks or like some like antisocial violence, that we gotta get the police involved. Yeah, clean up, the term clean up the streets. And it's just done so that and a lot of it is like an economic aspect, not like the economic, so that the people, so that they make it more attractive for tourists to come. They make it more attractive for developers to use land, make it more attractive for landlords, to worry about this, make it attractive for stall owners. And again, like they're doing this to out of this like this, because if you think in our organization, the people who are organizing, people who have facing housing issues, that if they get to the root of the issue of commodification of housing and all sorts of things, that threatens them, and they have to do this to make sure that all threats are taken out, And another point we've talked about this a few times in like past episodes, the use of Rwanda as a sort of like prime example of, and see, they're taking care of themselves, or Botswana is like unlike the other liberation governments in Southern Africa, that like they know how to, but in the case of Rwanda, they're highly repressive. There's a wealth is wealth gap. They're basically a proxy for corporations to loot the Democratic Republic of the Congo for its minerals, used for like a lot of tech. As for the case for Botswana, they displaced the indigenous San people for the fact that Botswana is one of the larger diamond, I believe it's a diamond producers, and they're taking the land from them and so forth. So again, they use Africans. So in a few cases where they promote Africans as, see, if you don't fight each other, then you could be this guy or this woman or so forth. But in the end, it's when they're decrying black on black violence or African violence in one way, they end up supporting African violence in a different way.
Exactly. Yeah, they support it on all facets. It's not just here. We have it throughout the global South, where they're backing, ethnic, tribal, warfare. So, yeah, I guess maybe we could just talk about what are some alternatives that can be used, or aside from, the state apparatus, in terms of like providing services to, decrease or help, eliminate this, or just, what are just some solutions in general that we can try to utilize to deal with this?
I think, as I mentioned before, that we have to understand like where these things come from, where these state apparatuses come from. We had a couple of quotes from our recently or about to be freed political prisoner Sundiata and Acoli. He talks about the corruption of prisons. The prisons come back as far as Louis XIV of France. And Mabillon wrote that penitents might be secluded in cells like those of Carthusian monks. They're being employed in various sorts of labor. 1790, on April 5th, Pennsylvania Quakers actualized this concept. The capstone of a 14-year struggle to reform Philadelphia's Walnut Street Jail. So again, if we think of prisons and jails and police and as the national things, then it's going to be difficult to sort of picture the solution. And again, not only when it has the actual solution, but also knowing that, and this is again from Sundiata Acoli, that in 1850, approximately 6,700 people were found in the nation's newly emergent prison system. Almost none of the prisons were black. They're more valuable economically outside the prison system because there are other means of racial control. There's like most new African black men, women, and children were already present for life, child slaves. So first, understanding the history, and second, as we talk about taking care of the root issues, like people are facing housing issues, and making sure that landlords and developers aren't like screwing them. And this could be from forming tenant unions or eviction defense or stuff like that. If there's housing, if we know there's like abandoned buildings out there that people could get into those buildings to house. There are legal standards where if you're staying in a building for a certain amount of time, again, I'm not a legal expert, but it's from knowing that in certain places that you could get with the Homesteading Act. It's kind of ironic that you could do this with the Homesteading Act because the Homesteading Act was done in a way that took land away from the indigenous people. So again, like looking at things dialectically, you could take something that was done to disperse people to end up making sure that people have a place to live. That's ironic. And again, finding ways to resolve issues through some conflict resolution, or just making sure that people are not so alienated that if there's an issue that they can actually go somewhere and they have people to back them up. So again, that's the importance of organizing, of thinking collectively instead of individually. And see what else. Another point is also, again, like incorporating that political education with that organization there, and seeing or taking what organizations are out there and say, like, people have a lot of people go to religious, either church or mosque or temple or synagogue, so forth. And if a lot of people know each other, then you can say, hey, if there's an issue, then we can bring it up here and then have a space to do so. And were there other things that you were thinking of as well?
Yeah, I think you made some excellent points. I think the underlying theme in what you said is, utilizing community and using, the community and the people in your, locales to create alternatives, to provide housing or material needs. Like if there's, like you said, like abandoned houses and areas where that haven't been used, maybe as community pull resources together as much as y'all can. If y'all have the means to buy those places and provide those services, some mutual aid as well is also good, as an alternative. And just in general, like, organizing the people in your community around some of these things, going, possibly like even door to door through surveys, figure out, okay, like what are some actual needs in just that community? If it's a organization focused primarily on Africans, or you're in a neighborhood primarily focused on Africans, like you just try to find areas where they're mostly concentrated in, because those tend to be the places where, people are left without services. And, there's the aspect of that's what, what we've been saying this whole episode is like, those are some of the things that lead to most of the things that lead to the quote unquote African on African violence that we see within our communities. It's just, deprivation and lack of needs being met, material needs being met. So we got to make sure that we fill in that void as well. And then also, even working with, to some degree, local gangs and stuff like that, like, because the lumpen proletariat definitely plays a role. So I think, in some ways, like, a lot of that anger that we see in our communities is misdirected, essentially, where, you're angry about being, in poverty or whatever the case is. And there's just the social and material conditions that you're in. So you kind of, and then just due to proximity to, you just take it out on the closest people to you, in a way. So I think in a way to help those that are inflicting that in some way is to, these people are still human and we can't treat them like how the state treats them. It's not going to serve no purpose at the end of the day. So we have to, work with them, talk to them, provide, organize them and give them PE, because they, if you've been socialized to think one way, you can be socialized to think out of it, essentially. So, so that's just what it takes, I believe, to help cultivate and meet the needs of the people and create revolution, essentially. Like, it starts with that. People think that revolution just comes out the sky and it's just like this one big moment, everyone has guns and they're marching up to the White House or something like that, and it does up like kind of like that stuff we seen last year. Like, that's not revolution. Like, it doesn't happen that way. Like, so it's a process. So we got to start somewhere, and that's where we start at. So yeah, that's one of the things I believe. So, do you have anything else you wanted to bring up?
And just another thing I'll follow up with, like street organizations, is a study that again, like understanding that people form street organizations or called gangs. It's not, like, again, like you said, it's not a reason. They're not doing it just for the lulls. They're actually, they're feeling like there's a dissociation of alienation, and like a lot of those organizations came about because the result of that deprivation of either like organizations that were somehow like destroyed through governmental prowl or other counterintelligence, and they're the people still like want to hang out to do something and end up in that certain way, and it's not just for Africans but other folks who come into the country and they're facing like massive barriers to employment, to education, and so forth. And there's certainly there's a history out there of truces and Pantsula Shakur and Tupac Shakur. They have the Code of Thug Life. You can find it online. If you're a part of a street organization, these are things that if you're gonna do that life, then basically sell the beef with people there, and not to mention if you think of work of Fred Hampton and the original Rainbow Coalition, we think of the truces during the LA Rebellion, or look at some of the stuff from the BLA, some other African organizations that, and I'm sure there's plenty examples elsewhere in the African diaspora and on the continent where you have these people who feel that attachment and other people, and some of that gets diverted elsewhere. That's a powerful force right there, and we gotta think, and you gotta get out of the. I don't want to say if something happened because of gang violence, that should just forget it. But if we understand all the systemic issues behind it, then we can solve it in a way that that counteracts the state force against it. And another point is that the whole aspect, the whole pathology of African violence is particularly expressed by the way the state's record on who gets to die. Think of one point from Dr. Amos Wilson that, and I think the stats are still pretty stark, that on March 1st, 1987, there's a total of 1,874 prisoners under sentence of death. Of that number, 777 or 42% were Black. And you read other research about the death penalty and the snakes that, and the snakes that that the death penalty is given way more often for African and European. And although they did initially give Dylann Roof the death penalty for the murder of the Charleston of the night Africans in Charleston, which later got repealed to life in prison, that no European has been sentenced to death for killing an African. So again, the whole aspect of taking something where, as we said at the top, that of ancestral violence being an issue of opportunity and location, and most you talk about African, Latino, Asian, or although I do believe that especially for indigenous women, the number one source of violence is not indigenous men, it's European men. So that's the one exception. For the most part, whoever you're around most often is who is most likely to be the recipient of that violence. So, but to the extent that African violence is so particularized that it's being out to the point of having to do this elimination. So,
yeah, exactly. You hit it right on the head right there, man. And like you were saying, like this, we have to understand racial capitalism, and how it works, essentially, to understand how to, combat it in various ways. And the way it, in this way, pathologize or, exaggerates certain things within our communities, whatever, and then, create our own propaganda against it too. So yeah, we do appreciate you guys joining us on this episode. We definitely implore you guys to take a look at our other podcasts, which I'll get into. But before I even discuss that, one thing I would like to say is, if you want to, stay afloat with some of the latest merchandise and, you into a lot of the, African aesthetics, definitely support our Forward Ever shop, where we, sell a lot of our merchandise through. And that's how we actually utilize those funds for our party and pushing it forward. So definitely take a look at that when you get a chance. I'll have the link will be in the description. So be sure to cop something. The stuff is very nice, very fly, very comfortable too at the same time. But yeah, we also have other podcasts as well. Actually, I may need your help with some of these, Evan, but I know we definitely have, the comrade with the Forward Ever, the comrades with the Forward Ever podcast as well. We also have lovely Jamu and his lovely daughter Sakura with their podcast as well. I believe they're every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
And our ancestors' voices, and they recently they set up a separate Facebook page for our ancestors' voices. So if you're on Facebook, you can check that out there.
There we go. So yeah, I think that's all the podcasts, right?
And we got the weekly, but actually bi-weekly Pan-African news by our Anya Sanwu and the folks out in the Southwest. And we also have, and there's also like comrades, Black Power Media, Reach Cards Colonialism. And they also like Hood Communists. They still have like a bi-weekly live discussion on Telegram. And there's also the weekly Revolution African Women, although they haven't done podcasts in a while. Hopefully they'll do one. It's not the point, but if you want to check out the episodes they have, do that as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you guys for tuning in. We hope to catch you on our next episode next week. And before we sign off, we like to say, if you're not an organization, please join an organization Fight for Justice. If you want to join the A-APRP, there'll be information in the description to join our party. Definitely tap that. And then, but once again, if you feel like these guys are crazy or, we're not, fight for something that you believe in. So, and the way you do that is not just you, just constantly talking about it on social media or to your friends. You actually have to struggle around and to take action on it. So, yes, it's good to, talk to people around, about it. Not to say you shouldn't do that at all, but you have to take action and do something about it, unless you're not going to realize it. And at that point, you just be talking all talk. Yeah.
Like all these, like all the ideas we talk about, all the things we talk about, they don't come from the sky. They come from actually, they come from the struggle, and any further innovations in the struggle on how to fight, they're going to come from the continued struggle and listening and so forth. So you got to do that out there. It's not intellectualized. It's only going to do only a small amount.
Exactly. Yeah. So you got to organize what you want, man. You got to organize what you want. So we definitely, once again, appreciate you guys tuning in. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode and look forward to catch you on the next one. So forward ever.
Forward.